Hey everyone, Coach Dave here, along with Coach Corian. We're with Peak Performance Fitness, and we're out at the Hawthorne Clubhouse and Fitness Center, and we're going to be going through a series of videos to discuss how and why to use certain pieces of equipment and how to use them safely. So without further ado, here we go. All right, we're going to be going over the Concept 2 rower. It seems pretty simple and straightforward. However, there's a lot of nuances that come with this piece of equipment, and there's a couple different faults we have. So we want to make sure that we always keep a flat back. So when you first sit on this rower and throughout the entire exercise, always sit with a neutral spine or sit tall on your sit bones. Okay, so you'll notice Corian is sitting pretty tall, and we want to avoid rounding forward. She's going to demo that, and anytime this happens, you're going to get off this rower and you're going to have a creak in your neck or your back, and we want to try to avoid that. Okay, so over time and repetition, this would be bad. Next thing we want to talk about is strapping in correctly on the rower with these foot pedals. It's going to depend on how tall you are, for one, how flexible you are in your ankles, meaning how far forward can you go in this point here. So the higher, the lower number, these are labeled 5 through 1. 5 would be the highest number, 1 would be the lowest. So if it's at 1, this is going to be higher, meaning your heel is going to be higher. That's going to bring your angle of your knee higher, and that's going to be for somebody who's really, really flexible or shorter, okay? And we want to try to find a middle ground on this. So a good way to start is to kind of put these straps over the top where your toes meet the top of your foot. That's a good starting point. And also when she comes forward and grabs the handle and she's able to sit tall here when we reach in, is notice how the knees are kind of out of the way. If this was any higher, these knees would be up here and it would be kind of blocking her elbows. Our next point here is discussing the resistance here. So with the higher number, we have 10 through 1. The lower this is means there's 0 resistance, okay? So this will pretty much feel pretty easy. The higher this goes, the harder you have to work and the more it's going to work on the fan. This signifies when you're going down like a canal or a river, okay, how much wind resistance there would be. So if you want a harder workout, you bring this damper up towards the higher end, towards 10. And if you want it to be a little bit easier, you bring it down. Typically, we recommend between a 4 and a 5 for the ladies, between 5 and 6 for gentlemen, all right? So our next point we're going to be talking about is the proper drive and return, okay? So this is going to be broken down into several steps, okay? The first thing we're going to talk about is the leg drive. That's the most important part of this movement here. So we want to think about, as we grab that handle and we go to drive out, we're going to extend through the legs and drive through those heels, okay? So a good practice here, if you're just getting used to the rower, is to just work through driving through those heels and going back. Okay, notice we're not hinging back yet and we're not pulling the handle. This is all coming from the legs. Okay, so we're going to start here first. We would do a couple reps just like this. Once we've kind of established that this is a leg driven movement, now we're going to start to hinge and work from the top part of the body. Okay, so when Corian would drive out from the legs, she's going to hinge back and use those hips muscles and the glutes and the hamstrings to open up. We call that hinging at the hips. Okay, so she's going to open up, and that creates a second pull. Okay, so she's able to get back and really drive through those feet a little bit more. Okay, so this point, notice how she's still not rounding that back. She's still keeping her core engaged, and she gets more momentum through the legs and then opens at the hip. Our third pull comes from the handles. So as she drives through those legs, she hinges, and at that same point, she's going to pull. And we want to pull straight in towards like the center of your chest. Sternum line is a great way to kind of have a landmark for. The other thing is we want to make sure that this chain stays in a straight line, that it never curls and goes up and around. Okay, we don't want to go up and around the knees. We want to make this a straight line back and then a straight line back in. Okay, so if we're going to demo this, legs, hinge, and then arms, that's how we do it. So we're going to go legs, hinge, and arms, and that's how we get the 3 pulls on the rower. Now we're going to show you how to return properly when we come back come back for another pull, okay? So it's going to be the reverse of how we just talk through it. So first it was legs, hinge, then arms. Okay, now it's going to be arms, hinge, then once we're past the knee and she can't reach any further, it becomes the legs. Okay, so we're going to kind of have Corian demo this a couple times. So she goes legs, hinge, arms, and then she returns the opposite, arms, hinge, legs. Notice how she's not allowing the seat to come back in, okay? We're going to try to simulate here as we're driving through this and creating a lot of power. The glutes and those hamstrings are super powerful muscles, okay? And if the seat comes all the way in, she's turned those muscles off, and now we're just using quads, and that's not what we want in this movement, okay? So one kind of a point of reference for you is to stop once you start to feel your heels coming off the saddle in the stirrups there, and that's when you stop and you start to drive back, okay? So she's going to drive back, hinge and pull, and then now watch, she leans in and then stops, and now she's fully loaded as she comes in here. She's got her posterior chain, those glutes and hamstrings are activated through this whole entire movement, and notice how she never rounds her back, okay? We've already talked about that, super important.